Welcome riders, Ryne here, owner of Richardson Motoworks. Today we're going to be showing you how to bleed your brakes. We're going to be doing it by hand in this video. I know a lot of you don't have a compressor. If you do have a compressor, go buy yourself a brake bleeder and it'll make this job, 15, maybe 20 minutes if that. But not everybody has access to that, so I'm going to be showing you how to do it by hand. Now this can take a little bit of time by hand. It's not the end of the world, but if you want it done properly, it's just something, that might take a minute. First things first, when you're doing brake fluid, always make sure you get a new can of brake fluid and you're opening it. Don't use something that's been sitting in your garage for, 6 months, a year, 20 years, you have no idea. Brake fluid attracts moisture, and that's what makes your brakes soft and make them not work like they should. So you always want to make sure you're opening a fresh thing of brake fluid. Otherwise, you're probably just going to be putting in the same bad brake fluid that you're taking out, essentially. The next biggest thing is to always check what kind of brake fluid your bike takes. On this cover right here, for your master cylinder, it will tell you. I'll pull it off here so you can see it. Before we do anything though, brake fluid is very corrosive. It will eat paint, it will eat everything. Don't worry if you splash it on something for a second and you wipe it off, you're fine. If you get it, in the event that you spill it everywhere all over your bike or something, get it off as fast as you can, and if you're worried that it's gone down into crevices and stuff like that, spray some water on it. Water essentially, once again, since it absorbs water, kind of neutralizes it. So if you are filling up here and you spill it all down the side, it's all down your tank, gets on your radiator and stuff, obviously don't soak your bike, but it's not going to hurt to pour some water on it. It will, dilute it, and it's not going to ruin your paint or anything. However, whatever you get it on, please wipe it off. I always like to take a towel, especially you're working with the front brakes, wrap it around kind of everything here. That way you drip, you spill it, whatever, it's on your towel, it's not on your paint, it's not going to hurt anything. And I'll pull this cap off here and show you the writing on it so that you can see what I'm talking about for the brake fluid that you need. Brake fluid comes in like .3, .4, .5, 5.1, I believe. There are some that you can use. You can't really mix any of them. There are some that are, I believe it's 5 and 5.1 maybe, that you can interchange. However, whatever your cap says, just use it. You can't use .4, you can't .5, you can't use .3 and .5 together, and whatever is in your bike. For example, if you have .4 in your bike, you cannot switch it to, if you start pouring .5 in there, even after you empty everything out, there's still going to be some in there. If you want to change brake fluids, go to a .5 or something like that. In all reality, you should just be replacing your brake lines and everything. So just go with what the manufacturer recommends. And here's what your cap kind of looks like. We'll show a close up here after a moment, but it says use only .4 brake fluid. Once again, it might be a .5, .5.1, .3. Just use whatever the cap says. Otherwise you're going to run into some problems. So that's your cap, and you should have a little, not all bikes, but the majority of them have a little plastic cover here that goes under your metal cover, and then a little rubber seal. And this rubber seal always holds a little bit of like moisture and brake fluid in it, so when you take it off, just be careful because you can spill it everywhere. So I always flip it over upside down on a rag, that way it's not getting on anything. Now, to do this by hand, first things first, you don't want to, if you're doing it by hand, you don't want to be sitting here pumping this thing for a million days to get all this bad brake fluid out of here. So I always suck all the bad brake fluid out of here first. That way you only have to worry about clearing the lines and not clearing the lines and all this brake fluid up here. I use a syringe like this. You can buy them on Amazon. I think a 6-pack is like 15 bucks or something like that. I'm sure you can find them other places, or just one of them. They're great for this. And then this is actually battery vent line is what it is for batteries, AGM batteries. The overflow line is all it is. Any sort of rubber tube like this will work as long as it fits on your brake bleeder, and I'll show you that in a minute. And clear. You want it to be clear so you can see if bubbles are coming out. If you have something like a black line or something like that, you have no idea if bubbles are still coming out. So you have to have something that's clear, at least the line. This doesn't have to be clear, but the line has to be clear. So now this is a little longer than I need to suck it out of here, so I'm not going to put it on there. I'm just going to use a syringe and suck it straight out of here. Now this is not terrible, but it's not great either. It should be a much lighter yellow than this for being .4. Don't freak out if you have, I think .5 is like a purple color. So there are, .5 is a darker color. So if it's super dark and you have .5, don't worry. But .4 should be a little bit lighter than this. This isn't terrible, but keep in mind, if you're pulling what looks like Coca-Cola out of here or something, it has not been done in a long time, and you are probably going to be in for some deeper problems other than bleeding your brakes. You're probably going to have a clogged caliper or clogged master cylinder or a line, something like that. Not always, but just keep in mind, if you have Coca-Cola coming out of here, you've probably got some problems. You can use whatever container. I just have an empty oil container that I'm going to put all my bad brake fluid in. You can also use a Coke can or something like that. Those are actually very nice because you're going to I cut a hole in the top of this. You're going to take your vent line and stick it in here so it can drain into here. Pop cans are awesome because you can flip the tab around and stick this hose through the tab, and it'll hold it tight so it's not going to fall off. And you can actually hang the pop can by this, and it'll just stay there if you put it through the pop tab. But you'll need this in a minute. So now that we got all of the bad brake fluid sucked out of here, I'm going to go ahead. Once again, open a new container. Being a shop, I do this probably once a week, so I know that I just opened this 2 days ago, so I can use it. Once again, make sure you're using whatever is in. This is .4. That's what the bike calls for, and that's what I'm going to be pouring in here. Now there is, a lower level, an upper level on this. When doing this, you're going to have to fill this up a couple times to bleed it by hand, probably. So fill it up, higher than it normally would be. Just make sure you're not overflowing, because you're going to have to wipe it off so it doesn't eat your paint. Okay, now that we have it filled up the top here, most importantly, and I'm just as guilty of forgetting to do this until it goes everywhere, there are some bikes that when you squeeze your lever, it will launch brake fluid out of this reservoir. I mean, it'll hit the garage ceiling on some bikes. It'll go all over your tank and everything. So either take the rubber grommet that came out of there, or your plastic piece. I always use the plastic piece just because it's a little easier to clean off than the rubber one. Just put it on there, and all that's doing is blocking it from shooting brake fluid, across your garage. Now, if you come down here to your caliper, there is a bleed screw that I will show you in a close-up here. Okay, once again, now we've got filled up here with fresh brake fluid. Got a cap back on it so it doesn't spray all over the place. You need to bleed it from your bleeder down here. We'll cut to another video here so you can see it better, since this one's kind of buried. There's a bleeder right here. It's a little 8mm screw with kind of a nipple on the end of it to bleed. Now, sometimes they'll be out here at the end of your brake line. Sometimes there are two of them on a caliper. If there are two of them, make sure you do both of them. If there's only one, you only got to worry about the one. They can be in different places. Sometimes they're on the bottom of the caliper, unfortunately. If it's a good quality caliper, they're on the top because air rises to the top. From the bottom, they can be a real pain to get the air out of sometimes. But you always want to bleed however many you have. There are two on there, bleed both of them. Every now and then, some of the nicer bikes, adventure bikes, high performance bikes, they have one up here on your master cylinder as well. Like this banjo bolt that holds your brake line on will actually have a bleeder on it as well. So just be aware of that. If you're bleeding down here and it will not pump up, still feels like it has air, chances are you probably have one up here. There are even some bikes, older BMWs, that this brake line runs down to under the tank and connects and then runs out, and there's a bleeder under the tank. Now 9 times out of 10 you don't have to touch that, but if you're having a ton of trouble, just look up online and see how many bleeders you have and where they're at, because there might be one you're just missing and that's what your problem is. So switch to this video over here so you can see. You put your rubber line, that's where this comes in handy, on your bleeder here. And make sure it's on there nice and tight. And once again, take your 8mm wrench. And once again, these are one of those things that you do not have to tighten to the moon. A lot of people do, and they start to round out. These are a real pain to work with when they're rounded out and hard to get out. And if you do have to replace them because they're rounded out, you have to bleed your whole brake system, and it just makes it a little more complicated when you have to take them out from being stripped. So now we got a line on there. Take your wrench, and with your wrench on there, pull in your brake like you're hitting the brake. Pull it as hard as you can, not as hard as you can, but a firm grip. And lefty-loosey, break your little caliper loose, and you'll feel your brake lever depress here, and it should go all the way back to the handlebar. That's fine, that's what it should be doing. Now, with it held there, still held to your handlebar, go ahead and close this bleeder that you just opened. Now, when you opened it and it got soft up here at the lever, brake fluid should have came out. And once again, this is where this clear line comes in handy. You can see that brake fluid came out. So go ahead and tighten it. Now, there are a lot of different ways to do this. Some people say to not do it this way. The way I'm about to tell you, that's a very old school thought in my mind. I've done this probably 1,000 times now, give or take, and I've never had any issues doing it this way. But I always, once again, press this brake lever, crack it open down here, it'll get soft, and then I pull my wrench off. This is still loose, by the way, still open. Holding the line on so it doesn't come off, and I just pump this. Well, I think the line got tight again here in one moment. You might have to loosen it kind of a turn or two, so to speak. And especially with a fresh battery line like this, it's stiff enough that it'll twist your bolt back tight, so to speak. But with it loose, you can pump it up and just pump. I don't know if you can see it in the video. I'm pumping all this brake fluid out just by hand instead of doing, pumping it, holding it once, tightening it, doing that 10,000 times. You can just sit here and pump it with it open. But keep in mind, you have to watch up here and watch your mark on your master cylinder here to make sure that this does not get below the lower level, because if it does, you'll suck air into your system. If you suck air into your system, then you just made 10 times the work for yourself. So pump this up. Once it gets to the lower level, then once it gets to the lower level, go ahead and tighten this. And if you've been watching, you can see that the brake fluid that's coming out of this line started as, kind of that dark, almost sweet tea color, and now it's nice and clear. This means that we're getting, you know, some of the fresh brake fluid that we put in here is already down. Once we get to this point where it's coming out, you know, a new color, kind of nice and clear, then we're essentially good. But I'm gonna do it one more time just to be safe. I like to make sure it's, you know, thoroughly flushed. So I'm gonna pull my cap off, pour some more brake fluid in here. Put my cover back on so I'm not spraying it everywhere. Then I gotta break this open again. Pump away. Now it's really nice and clear, so I'm gonna go ahead. Now when you go to close this for the final time, you can go ahead and pull your brake lever all the way to the handlebar. Hold it there as you close this. That'll just make sure you're not sucking, if there was an air bubble in this line that came out, it'll just make sure you're not sucking it back in. You may get air bubbles coming out like this, you're not doing anything wrong, it's just what happens, even though it's closed. So, now we did this side, go ahead and pull it off here. And since this bike is a dual caliper, you know, front, you have to do the exact same thing just to the other brake caliper. So it's going to be this exact same process on this other side, you know, just the left side, not the right side. I'm going to go ahead and do it here. We're not going to film the side because it's the exact same.